Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, welcome to the third day of Fallout spoilers. Let's get started. First off, we have Piper Wright, Public Reporter. I almost misread public as something else.
Tis a strong start.
I'm not gonna... I'm just gonna move on. Whenever it deals damage to a player, investigate that many times. Whenever you sack a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. You get to deal damage to make clues, and then you could scale her up to deal bonus damage to make more clues. It kind of reminds me of the blue-white guide that was originally printed in The Walking Dead. I like that one just a little bit more. It had Skulk, but if you scale them up, the Skulk didn't matter. Not as efficient because you have to invest 2 mana to sack a clue, unlike that Walking Dead card. You did not. Lily Bowen, Raging Grandma. Vigilance and enters with 2 +1/+1 counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, you double the counters on it, and then you remove all but one of the counters once you hit 16 power. And then you gain 1 life for each counter removed this way. I don't know a whole lot of decks that purposely try to move counters off of things onto other stuff, but he'd be handy for that. You'd at least get to attack with a 16 power thing. Weird card, in my opinion. Nuka Launcher. For 2 mana, 3 to equip. Gives a creature +3/+0 and Intimidate. Whenever equipped creature attacks until the end of the defending player's next turn, that player gets 2 rad counters whenever they cast a spell. I get it. The flavor is they're hiding in like some kind of shelter, and if they do anything like leave the shelter, they get radiated, and that's what they're trying to convey. Kind of fun. I don't think they'll purposely avoid the rad counters unless it's really late in the game and their life is really low. Otherwise, that is also a death sentence in the late game doing nothing. So that's kind of like the worst case scenario for them, best case scenario for you. I don't see Hornet Queen that much anymore. This used to be like something that hits the table and no one attacks you for a lot of turns because no one wants to trade with death touching tokens. Atomize. Instant speed for 4 mana, destroy target non-land permanent, and you get to proliferate. Proliferate has gotten so much stronger with this year because it was back in the day, like War of the Spark and in the OG printing of proliferate in like the Scars of Mirrodin block, there was nothing worth you proliferating except planeswalkers and I guess poison counters, and now it seems like everything in your mother has a counter on it, and proliferate has gotten so much better than what it used to be. It just gets tacked on to everything. Interesting card if you're all about proliferating stuff. You get a little bit of density in terms of synergy and removal from this card. McCready Lamplight Mayor. 2-drop Human Advisor. Whenever a creature controlled with power 2 or less attacks gains Skulk until end of turn. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater attacks you, its controller loses life, you gain 2 life. I like that it's per creature. What's kind of like humorous is you're cutting the damage in half should the creature have 4 power, and it hurts them as well. For how cheap it is, it's pretty cool, and it's also a 1/3, so you also block a considerable amount of aggro. You're taking care of the stuff that's 2 power or less, and then it takes care of things that are 4 power or greater as well.
Performing all manner of public service.
It's a unique taxes card. Inexorable Tide is getting a reprint. It's fairly expensive. It was a $10 card. It feels like this card got real low for a long time, like in that slum period of when I was saying proliferate didn't do anything. Now, with the resurgence of everything getting counters put on it, Inexorable Tide became an expensive card. Hope this brings down the price. I'd love to feature it on the channel. Unfortunately, this is out of my budget, and the reason why it's so good is you proliferate off of anything that you cast. Just imagine that, especially in the late game where you're casting a lot of spells in a single turn. If you have the right kind of counters on the right permanents, it could probably win you the game on its own. Enraged Yao Guai. 2/2 Vigilance and Trample. It enters the battlefield, X +1/+1 counters on it. When it enters the battlefield, destroy any number of artifacts or enchantments with total mana value less than or equal to X. That's a pretty steep price. Triple green and X. Its floor is pretty awful. Its ceiling is decent, so I don't think it's really worth your time playing. If you heard me talk about yesterday, I want my removal to be 2 mana or less, and by the time this starts paying dividends, where I'm okay with that, it would be 6 mana, and at 6 mana, I don't feel too great about investing that much into this. I'd rather play Bane of Progress for 6 mana and hit everything guaranteed. So this card kind of misses the mark for me. Power Fist. Quick creature has trample, and whenever this creature deals damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Ooh. If you're all about +1/+1 counters, this is the card for you. I have a couple of buddies that play the Kaldheim Vorniclex, where it doubles counters. It's pretty dope. It's a 6/6 with trample and haste, so crack him with this on it, and I imagine you put like at the minimum 6 counters, because you get in for 3 damage. You normally get 3 counters, it gets doubled, and then it gets worse and worse. And on top of that, this card also awards trample, so you don't even need a trample card in play. You just need to stick this on something big and scary, and then it gets even scarier. Mariposa Military Base. Enters battlefield tapped. If you do, you get 2 rad counters. And then for 5 mana, draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each rad counter you have. I like it. I like the self-sacrifice to draw cards. So once you get a rad on you, with every passing turn you get a new one added to, so obviously the cost of this will eventually hit 0. I like that personally. I don't mind losing life to draw cards. I do mind that it comes in tap, so that's a bit of a bummer. I don't know, you're playing with fire, and I like to play with fire, I guess.
I like 'em fiery.
Vexing Radgull. 2 mana, 1/2 with flying. It deals damage to a player. That player gets 2 rad counters if they don't already have any, and then otherwise you proliferate. Damn, that's pretty sweet. This kind of fits the category of the Thrumming Bird and the one with Toxic, and then there's another one with Infect. It fits in that category because they all have the same like 2 mana cost. I like this one a lot more because the downside of Thrumming Bird is you needed a counter in play for you to start proliferating. This puts something on and lets you proliferate after, so it's useful at every stage of the game. It's kind of got the best of both worlds from all those creatures, and they kind of like jammed it into one. I like this a lot. Synth Infiltrator. It has Improvise. If you don't know what that means, you could tap artifacts to reduce this cost by 1 generic. If the artifact has a color, it actually will pay for the color up here. I don't know, there's not a lot of blue artifacts out there. Anyways, you can have Synth Infiltrator enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, but if it is a synth artifact creature and still has its original type, it's just a clone for 5 mana, and you could reduce the cost. Walking Ballista's getting a Pip-Boy version. Looks pretty sick. Reminds me of like the time of the 90s where every action hero dual wielded some kind of weapon, and in this case, you're dual wielding lasers. Young Deathclaws has menaced 4/2 for 4. Each creature card in your graveyard has Scavenge. Whoa. That scavenge cost is equal to the mana cost. Scavenge is when you exile a creature card from your graveyard and you pay its mana cost. Put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that card's power onto target creature. So it doesn't even have to be on Young Deathclaws, you could throw it on something else. There's only one other card in Magic's history that gives all creatures in your graveyard Scavenge. I don't remember what it's called. You know, adding another to the mix and like getting a little bit of extra value from your dead creatures is pretty nice. Mutational Advantage. It's an instant. Permanency control with counters on them gain hexproof indestructible. Prevent all damage to be dealt to those permanents this turn. And proliferate. Alright. Well, you gotta do everything on a single card. Again, they just keep tacking on the word proliferate on everything, and it adds up. There's so many cards now in Magic that have proliferate written on them. And then you get the added benefit of this being a combat trick. You could prevent damage dealt to your planeswalkers. Probably the only reason why that has that sentence of text on there is to protect your planeswalkers. I don't think there's a fog effect that's like that. Watchful Radstag has evolved for 3 mana. When it evolves, create a token that's a copy of it. It reminds me of the Copy Swarm and the Scoot Swarm. It's like weird conditions that make copies of themselves, and it gets progressively worse with every passing trigger. And Watchful Stag does that as well. Very scary card in my opinion. Recon Craft of Theta. It's a vehicle, and it enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 blue alien token, put a +1/+1 counter it. Whenever Recon Craft Theta attacks proliferate. It has crew too, so like the alien you make with it can't crew it. Kind of funny about this card is in Fallout 3, the spaceship is crashed and you find the wreckage. It kind of makes sense why the alien can't crew this own thing, because in the game it obviously crashed its own freaking ship.
Welcome to Earth.
So I kind of get the flavor as to why it produces a weak-ass alien. Hullbreaker Horror, alright. This is a nice reprint in the Pip-Boy. $2.50. This thing is a win condition. Whenever you cast a spell, you get to return a non-land permanent to someone's hand or return a spell you don't control to its owner's hand. It just keeps people out of your game. That's why it's so good. This thing is pretty threatening as a 7/8 and it can't be countered. So once it's in play, it's in play. It also has flash, so like you could catch people with their pants down and then untap and then just draw a pass, and then people are like, oh my god. Boatfly Swarm. Enter the battlefield 5+1/+1 counters on it. If damage would be dealt to Boatfly while it has a +1/+1 counter, prevent that damage, remove that many counters, and then give each player a rad counter for each counter removed. That's pretty fun. I love the rad mechanic, and I love that it affects everybody. I feel like if it affected just one person, it'd be slightly unfair. You can't have all the cards be like that. Like, there's already the ghoul, that's pretty scary. If your deck is all about putting rads on people, you could play around it. You could make it asymmetrical and protect yourself in some way, or if you could put more counters on everybody else, then it doesn't matter. Struggle for Project Purity. It's an enchantment. You choose Brotherhood or Enclave. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card, and then you draw a card for each card drawn this way. So in a game of Commander where there's 3 opponents, they'll each draw 1 while you draw 3. That's a pretty good deal. Whenever a player attacks you with 1 or more creatures, the player gets twice that many rad counters. Whoa, that's a pretty scary protection spell. It's supposed to deter people from attacking you, and if they're only getting in for chip damage, it's not worth it. But if they're attacking with really tall creatures and they could finish you off, you might get like a post-mortem kill because you'll rack up all the counters and they'll just die later in the game down the road. It generates a really strange dynamic in the game where the person that kills you will king make the other 2 players if they attacked with too many things. Interesting card. I think the Brotherhood part will probably be picked more often just because you're netting more cards than everybody else. Vault 87, Forced Evolution. Chapter 1, gain control of a non-mutant for as long as you control the saga. Chapter 2, put a counter on target creature control. Becomes a mutant. Chapter 3, draw cards equal to the greatest power among mutants you control. The countdown alerts everybody to what your game plan is. It's no like Return of the Wild Speaker or any of the other cards that do the same thing, because they don't know it's coming when you play it. This, on the other hand, you're just telegraphing, I'm making a big thing and I'm going to draw a ton of cards, and everyone's alarms will be going off and they're not going to be too happy about you about to draw a bunch of cards.
Kill him!
Rawl, the Troubleshooter. Once during each turn, you may cast a spell from 1 cards in your graveyard that were milled this turn. Then you can tap to have each player mill a card. I like it that it has a big butt. It's a 1/4. It will stave off a lot of aggro in the early to mid game. I don't mind self mill, especially when you can get access to it. It's just like windowed access, you know what I mean? Because it's only from the cards you mill that turn. So if you mill 2 really good spells, you're going to be like,
ah, shucks.
Vault 11, Voter's Dilemma. Each opponent creates a 1/1 white human soldier. Chapters 2 and 3. Each player secretly votes for up to 1 creature, then those votes are revealed. If no creature got votes, each player draws a card. Otherwise, destroy each creature with the most votes or tied for the most votes. It does say secretly, so I guess there won't be any table talk. It kind of depends on if people know who the big bad is, that creature will get the most votes and it'll die. The making of a 1/1 human, like, I don't understand the point in that. The other 2 chapters make sense. Wild Wasteland. For 3 mana enchantment, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn, and you skip your draw step. I want to build a deck that plays things from exile so bad, and there's been a couple of cards that have came out just this year alone, and I just haven't gotten around to playing it. This would be a great card in that deck, I think. Thrill Kill Disciple. Squad and discard a card. When it dies, create a junk token. Well, if you got a bunch of lands in your hand, you could pitch them and make an additional 3/2 copy of this. It's also got a significant stat block, so like you're gonna be putting 6 power into play for 4 mana, and then it gets bigger with each subsequent thing. You just need cards in hand, so it's not a bad deal. And then on death, you make a card advantage token. Survivor's Medkit. You tap one, tap it, choose one that has been chosen. Stim Packets, draw a card. Fancy Lad Snack Cakes, create a food token, and then Rad away. Target player loses all Rad counters, sack it. That's kind of nice. I like that you can keep it and save Rad away for last, or you could use it right away. I imagine, me personally, I'd probably do the Stim Pack and then Rad away. I really don't care for food tokens at all. They don't do much, in my opinion. Unless you have a deck that's all about food synergy, I wouldn't. But I was thinking if they're going to be giving people Rads, they have to have Rad away. I guess I'm glad. It's the only thing that interacts with Rad so far, which is a bit of a bummer. Putting counters on players is one of the most abused thing in Commander because there's so little to do it. There's at least one white card off the top of my head that removes counters from players, and that is about it. There might be one more, I just can't remember what it's called, if it does exist. I'm glad they got to include something to at least answer the Rad, but we've seen more Rad cards than we have seen cards that remove it, so I think it's still going to be a rampant issue. I guess I also can appreciate that it doesn't exile itself, so you could get it back at some point in the game. White Glove Gourmand. 4 mana, 2/2 human. Enter the battlefield, create 2 1/1 human soldiers. At the beginning of your end step, if another human died under your control this turn, create a food token. I get it.
They're cannibals.
The flavor text is hilarious. Here's to us. It's time we move beyond beef. Ruthless Rad Rat. Has squad, you exile 4 cards from your graveyard, and then it's a 2/2 with Menace. It's okay. Everyone uses their graveyard nowadays. I don't think exiling 4 things for the squad mechanic is worth a 2/2 body with Menace. If you're going to be playing rats, you're going to be playing the ones that could play infinite amount of copies of them. Butch Deloria, that's Tunnel Snakes. I love these guys from Fallout 3. Whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each rogue and or snake you control. For 2 mana, you get to put a menace counter on another target creature. It becomes a rogue in addition to its other types. It doesn't say till end of turn, so it's a permanent rogue once you do that. It makes sense because in the game you can elect to join the crew. I always dig, so I think they were awesome in the game for the short time span that you got to spend with them. And I wore the jacket for as long as I humanly could before things started one-shotting me and I had to give it up. Wasteland Raider. Squad 2, when it enters, each player sacks a creature. At least it scales. I guess that's the nice part about this, because nothing sucks more than hitting an edict effect once the board is cluttered and full of things that people are more than willing to sacrifice at the drop of a hat. At the late game, you're still making people, groan a little bit with this edict effect. Diamond City enters with a shield counter. It can be tapped to move a shield from Diamond City to a target creature. Activate only if there are 2 more creatures that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. That could be a little mana taxing since you need 2 creatures to enter. That means you can't use this as mana because you need to activate this to move the shield counter. It's a utility land, comes in untapped. I've seen a lot worse and I can get behind this. Colonel Autumn. 3 mana, lifelink, exploit. Other legendary creatures you control have exploit. Whenever a creature control exploits a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I have experience with giving a lot of things exploit. I play Henry Wu from the Jurassic Park ancillary set, and I've got a lot of experience. As exciting as it would be to put counters on your whole board, it can be a little challenging. You have to have a lot of fodder at your disposal at a certain point in the game. Battle of Hoover Dam. Choose NCR Legion. At the beginning of your end step, return target creature card with mana 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter. If you don't know what finality is, should it die with this counter on it, it gets exiled instead of put it into your graveyard. Legion, whenever a creature control dies, put 2 counters on target creature you control. Both abilities I think are particularly useful. I think Legion scales a lot better because you could have an unlimited amount of triggers versus NCR, it's only once a turn on your end step. Desdemona. Freedom's Edge. Vigilance, whenever Attacks. Target creature card in your graveyard that's an artifact or that has mana value 3 or less gains escape till end of turn. The escape cost is equal to the mana cost plus 2 exile 2 other cards from your graveyard. I like the flexibility. You can target an artifact or a creature. It's alright. It's a decent, I guess, recovery option. Ayula, Queen Among Bears, getting a reprint with the Pip-Boy. Whenever another bear enters, you get 1 of 2 effects. You get to put 2 counters on target bear or have a bear fight a creature you don't control. I like how Ayula looks right here. Much better than previous iterations we've gotten. Niton Lottery, 4 mana, choose a creature at random. You gain control of that creature until end of turn, untap it, gains haste, then destroy all other creatures. Hell yeah, I like that. Black doesn't have a whole lot of efficient board wipes. Like we have Toxic Deluge and we have Damnation, and then after that it gets to 5 mana, it gets to 6 mana. So it's a welcome board wipe in my opinion, and I like that you get to empty the board and then crush someone with a random creature, albeit it's random, so you don't know what you're going to get. If you steal a big thing, you get to crack someone pretty hard. Could be a weak creature, but I mean, if it's weak, then it gets passed back to them and you could care less. It's a bit of a win-win. Sierra, Nuka's Biggest Fan. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage, put a quest counter on Nuka's Biggest Fan and create a food token. Whenever you sack a food, target creature you control gets +X/+X, where X is the number of quest counters on Sierra. I like how in the first paragraph they wrote her whole name, and then in the last paragraph they're like, alright, let's shortcut it, just call it Sierra. They also got tired of writing Sierra, Nuka's Biggest Fan over and over again. It's just value, it's flavorful, she's clearly making sweet love to that Nuka-Cola. That's why you particularly make a food token, because Nuka-Cola is nutritious for you. Securitron, the Squadron. Squad for 3 mana, Vigilance, and whenever a creature token enters under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. They call it Squad, but it's just another version of Kicker. Everything's Kicker. The more you could put into play, the better the payout is, because the tokens will see each other, and since they're copies of this, you'll get bonus counters, if that makes sense. So if I put 1 extra Securitron into play, that 1 copy token gets 2 counters. Now if I make 2 copies of Securitron, I put 3 counters on both of the copy tokens. Boomer Scrapper. When it enters or attacks, lose 1 life and create a junk token. Whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Boomer Scrapper. I like that it scales and it becomes a 2/2 just from ETB, and it could get potentially bigger. It just says any token, doesn't have to be a junk token. You might be able to scale this up pretty fast by other means. And that brings us to the end of today's spoilers. If you stayed this long, subscribe. I do plenty of other things other than just reviewing spoilers. I do deck techs, I do gameplay, I do theory discussions, and I imagine there's something there that you will also enjoy. So everyone take care now. Bye.